Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Excited for this one?
Me too. This time we're cracking open Clear Thinking by Shane Parrish.
Ooh, this is a good one.
Yeah, it's all about how hidden defaults in our thinking kind of lead us to make, well, not the best decision.
Yeah, like those autopilot moments where you're like, why did I do that?
Exactly. And Parrish, he's got this really interesting background. He was in the intelligence world.
Right, worked with like high-level decision makers, folks dealing with some serious stakes.
Yeah, so he's seen firsthand how these thinking traps can play out. And he's also interviewed some big names like Charlie Munger, Daniel Kahneman.
People who've spent their lives studying how we think and why we make the choices we do.
So we're going to dig into all that and hopefully walk away with some tools to make better decisions in our own lives.
Sound like a plan.
So Parrish kicks off the book with this story that really grabs you. He's walking home at 3 a.m. after this intense operation.
Oh, I remember that part. You could feel the exhaustion and the doubt creeping in.
Right. And he starts questioning every decision he made that night. Like, did he do the right thing? Could he have done it better?
I think we've all been there in some way, That feeling of pressure, wondering if we made the right call.
Totally. And what struck me is he talks about how even in intelligence work, where decisions can have huge consequences, there was no real formal training on decision-making.
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you think about it. Like this crucial skill we use every single day, and most of us are just winging it.
Exactly. So Parrish had to learn through experience by making mistakes and figuring out what worked.
Which is where those defaults come in. He argues that because we often lack that structured training, our brains develop these ingrained patterns of thinking.
Almost like mental shortcuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're efficient, but not always accurate.
And the tricky part is we're often not even aware of them. They're operating in the background, influencing our choices without us realizing it.
Right. It's like those well-worn paths in a forest. You instinctively follow them because they're familiar, even if they don't lead to the best destination.
Okay, I'm starting to see the danger here. So how do we even start to identify these defaults?
Well, Parrish uses some great examples from The Godfather.
Well, I love The Godfather, classic.
Right. So he compares Sonny Corleone, the hothead.
Yeah, always flying off the handle.
To his father, Vito, who's much more calculated and strategic.
Okay. So how do they represent these different ways of thinking?
Well, Sonny, he's driven by emotion. That's what Parrish calls the emotion default. Remember when he gets the news about Connie and Carlo?
Oh, man, and he just charges off, gets ambushed.
Not a good outcome.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And Vito, on the other hand, he embodies this more deliberate way of making choices.
Right. He takes his time, gathers information, weighs the long-term consequences. He doesn't let his emotions hijack his thinking.
So he's the picture of clear thinking.
Exactly. He's thinking things through, not just reacting.
So are you saying we should all aspire to be like Vito Corleone?
Haha. Well, maybe not in every way. But there's a valuable lesson there about recognizing our own emotional triggers. Those situations or people that make us more likely to react without thinking.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
The more aware we are of those triggers, the better chance we have of pausing, stepping back, and making choices that are in line with our goals, instead of just letting our emotions run the show.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not about suppressing emotions entirely. It's about understanding how they influence our decisions and learning to manage them.
Exactly.
So we've tackled that emotion default. What other defaults do we need to watch out for?
Well, Parrish lays out 3 more. The ego default, the social default, and the inertia default. Each one kind of messes with our thinking in its own way.
Okay, let's break those down. Starting with ego. I feel like we all know someone who could benefit from hearing about this one.
Probably true.
Yeah.
The ego default is all about protecting our image, even if it means making bad decisions.
It's like that voice in our head that says, I can't possibly be wrong.
Exactly. Or that need to always look good, even if it means ignoring the facts or covering up mistakes.
Parrish uses Carlo Rizzi from The Godfather as an example.
Yeah, perfect example. Carlo, he's always feeling insecure and overshadowed in that powerful family.
Makes sense.
Oh.
He married into it, and he's not exactly a tough guy.
Right. So his ego's constantly bruised, and it leads him to make some really dumb choices.
Like betraying the family, try and prove himself.
Yeah, which obviously backfires spectacularly.
Not a great move. So how do we avoid falling into that ego trap?
Parrish suggests focusing on building genuine confidence, not the kind that's based on appearances, but the kind that comes from competence and a track record of success.
So knowing your strengths and weaknesses and being okay with both.
Exactly. When you're truly confident, you don't need constant validation. You can admit mistakes, take risks, and focus on growth without being afraid to look bad.
That makes a lot of sense. It
Yeah.
frees you from needing to prove yourself all the time.
Now let's talk about the social default. This one's all about conforming to the group, even when we know deep down it's not the right thing to do.
Oh, man. I think back to my teenage years, and I cringe a little. I definitely did some questionable things just to fit in.
We've all been there. Parrish says this urge to conform, it's hardwired into us. It comes from that deep-seated need for belonging.
Makes sense. We're social creatures after all.
Right. But the problem is it can stifle critical thinking and innovation. If you're always trying to blend in, you're less likely to challenge the status quo or come up with new ideas.
Parrish uses the Challenger disaster as an example of how this can play out with terrible consequences.
Yeah, it's a tragic case of groupthink. The engineers knew there were safety concerns, but they didn't speak up because they didn't want to rock the boat.
It's so easy to get caught up in that, especially in a work setting.
Right, you might have a different opinion, but you don't want to disagree with your boss or seem like you're not a team player.
Or even in social situations. You laugh at a joke, you don't find funny just to go along with the crowd.
Exactly. The key is to be aware of those moments and ask ourselves, am I making this choice because I truly believe it, or am I just going along to get along?
So it's about having the courage to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable.
Exactly. Sometimes going against the grain is the best way to avoid disaster and come up with truly innovative solutions.
Okay, so we've covered emotion, ego, social. What about that last one? Inertia.
This one's a sneaky one. It's the tendency to resist change, to stick with what's familiar, even when it's no longer serving us.
So basically, we're on autopilot, following the same routines, making the same choices, even when we know deep down things need to change.
Right. And Parrish links this back to our biology. We're wired to avoid loss. Change represents the unknown, and that's scary because it could lead to negative consequences.
So we stay stuck in our comfort zones, even if those zones aren't so comfortable anymore.
Exactly. We convince ourselves it's easier to just keep doing what we're doing, even if it's not working. It's like that saying, better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
So how do we break free from that inertia-induced slumber?
Well, Parrish suggests we need to create some friction in our lives to shake things up and disrupt those comfortable but unproductive patterns.
So like throwing out the old routine and trying something new?
It could be that drastic, but even small changes can make a big difference. Like setting clear rules and boundaries for yourself. Just to create that pause, that space for reflection before making decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like intentionally building in a speed bump to slow down your thinking.
Exactly. He talks about this no saying yes on the phone rule. It sounds simple, but it forces you to take a moment before committing to something you might regret later.
I like that.
Yeah.
So are there other ways to create that friction and shake things up a bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can see how that would be helpful, especially for people pleasers
Yeah,
or anyone who struggles to say no.
definitely. And he also talks about creating friction for bad habits. Like if you're constantly checking email and it's distracting you from more important work.
Oh, I'm totally guilty of that.
He suggests making it harder to access your inbox, like logging out every time or moving the app to a less accessible screen on your phone.
So basically, you're adding those little speed bumps to break the autopilot.
Exactly. You're
Yeah.
forcing yourself to be more mindful about your actions.
It's like building those mental muscles.
That's a great way to put it. Parrish also emphasizes self-awareness. We all have those weaknesses, those blind spots that can trip us up.
Definitely, I've got a few I'm working on.
The key is to identify them and then develop strategies to manage them.
One strategy that really resonated with me was his "what did I miss?" question.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's so simple, but it forces you to step outside your own perspective and consider other viewpoints.
It's like a built-in check for your blind spots.
Exactly. It helps you avoid those tunnel vision moments where you're so focused on one thing that you miss the bigger picture.
Parrish offers a whole toolkit of these safeguards. Techniques and rules we can implement to protect ourselves from making default-driven decisions.
It's like building a defense system for our minds.
I love that analogy. It's
Yeah.
about being proactive, not just reactive.
So it's not enough to just recognize these defaults.
Yeah.
We need to actively put strategies in place to counteract them.
Absolutely. And those decision-making principles we discussed earlier, defining the problem accurately, getting to the root cause, thinking about second and third order consequences.
They all play a role in building that mental defense system.
Right. They help us move beyond simply recognizing our defaults to actually making better choices.
It's like Parrish is giving us a mental workout routine.
Uh-huh. I like that.
Okay.
He's providing the tools and techniques we need to strengthen those decision-making muscles.
And like any workout, it takes effort and practice.
Exactly. Parrish is a big advocate for continuous learning when it comes to decision-making. He talks about keeping a decision journal.
Oh, yeah, where you document your thought process for major decisions.
Right, so you can go back later and see if your reasoning was sound or if you fell prey to any of the defaults.
It's like creating a feedback loop for your decision-making.
Exactly. You're constantly learning and refining your approach.
And that's what I love about clear thinking. It's not just about avoiding bad decisions. It's about developing a framework for making better choices in all areas of our lives.
From our careers to our relationships to those everyday decisions that shape our days.
It sounds like clear thinking is a must-read for anyone who wants to level up their decision-making game.
I definitely agree with that. And on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. This has been a fantastic deep dive into clear thinking. I feel like I've got a whole new toolkit for approaching decisions with more clarity and intention.
Me too. And I hope our listeners feel the same way.
If you're intrigued by what we've discussed today, I highly recommend checking out Clear Thinking by Shane Parrish. It's packed with insights and practical strategies that can help you make more informed and fulfilling choices in all areas of your life.
And here's a thought-provoking question from the book to leave you with. If this were the last year of your life, would you want to be doing what you're doing today?
That's a powerful one. It really challenges you to examine whether your choices are aligned with your values.
And hopefully inspires you to make any necessary adjustments.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into clear thinking. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more insightful conversations and deep dives into the books and ideas that matter.
See you next time.
Until then, keep those minds sharp.